A special Friday night edition of the podcast. We're going to talk about Ohio State marching on through Texas in the Cotton Bowl to head to another national championship to take on Notre Dame and the Fighting Irish. Ohio State, quite the story for this program over the last month. We'll take a look at the game, dig into it. Van's probably get some SEC stuff. And is there any part of you that feels good about Ohio State's full circle moment here as they look to win another national title? I'm going to have my thoughts on the Orange Bowl, Notre Dame's win, the storylines that we're battling throughout the night with Notre Dame and how they are perceived nationally and the James Franklin stuff. And we're going to have life advice. So a late one for you. I wanted to spend a couple of moments talking about the Orange Bowl with Notre Dame's win over Penn State. So now we know that Notre Dame's going to be playing Ohio State for a national championship after beating Penn State. And my first thought after the game, and really going into it, but I felt like the game was confirmation of it, that both these teams are good. They're both good football teams. And I want to start with Penn State, and that's not in a disrespectful way. It's just simply the fragility of the narrative. And the narrative is a word that I've learned to absolutely despise, but it fits here. And how different the narrative is for James Franklin and Penn State, even if they were just to make it to the national championship game. It'd be a Big Ten fest. Franklin could talk about what he's been building and tell the college football world it's about the process and getting to that next step, and all these different things that would feel real in anticipation of a national championship game. But you have an awful night from Aller, which we'll get to his interception. A defensive back falls down. Greathouse, who was terrific for Notre Dame, their receiver, takes it to the house. And again, you have the turnover, and it's a game-winning field goal, and Penn State's out. So now you can spin it this way, where if you look at the Franklin resume against the top teams, it's atrocious. He's 1-14 against the AP top 5. I'll tell you right now, there's not a ton of coaches that have great records against AP top 5. You know, there's rarely a guy in there where you're like, man, another great record against the AP top 5. If you want to take it out a little bit further, he's 4-19 against the AP top 10. I think the most alarming one for Franklin, he's now 3-10 when both Penn State and the opponent are ranked in the top 10. If you wanted to add to that, now that they've been eliminated, which I think is everyone's favorite thing to do with every single team that's eliminated now with the playoffs, because you even have more rounds to do it, is, they couldn't beat Ohio State in the regular season. They lose to Oregon. I thought they were terrific in the Oregon game. I thought they were great against a tough USC team that has a bad record. I thought that they stepped up big against Minnesota, who I think is a good football team, right? But if you want to, you can say, SMU, Boise's ridiculous seed, and then they play Notre Dame and they can't win the game. I just, after watching it all season, and I hope that despite getting stuff right or wrong, I am watching all season. It's just, didn't go their way. At 3-0, 20 minutes into the game, I thought it was going to go Penn State's way. It reminded me a bit of what they were doing against Oregon and getting that push against them. And it felt like Oregon couldn't really do anything with this offensive line and this two-headed monster at running back and Tyler Warren, who was going to make a ton of plays. But I'd ask you this, Penn State fans, what was your favorite play by a receiver in the Orange Bowl? I'll wait. It's going to take you a while. But as the game was playing out, like 20 minutes in, and I try to remind people of this all the time. You're watching football, team goes up 14-0, and everyone's like, thanks for playing, thanks for showing up. And you're like, it's actually 2-0. Let's see what happens when they settle in. Let's see when the defense and the offense aren't as prepared for each other at the beginning of the games and maybe haven't figured out each other's tendencies. But it really felt like Penn State's game for the first 20 minutes, and it was only 3-0. Because of the physicality of this. And then you add to that, the Notre Dame loses a left tackle. They lose another offensive lineman. They lose Riley Leonard for a series in this where the backup, Angeli, actually got him to a field goal. So it's 10-3 at half. And you're like, all right, they're in this. But Penn State feels like the better football team. And look, the Singleton, Katron Allen, and Allen's probably one of my favorite single players in all of college football this year. You feel like you can keep going back to that and it'll be enough, but it's not enough when your quarterback was as bad as Aller was last night. I mean, you think Aller was bummed out at the end of last season. This is going to be a tough offseason getting through all of this for that guy mentally. McElroy on the call, there was a couple things with him, and I know it ended up being a thing that people were making fun of for him because he was saying, like, look, I trust Aller in this situation. And then he throws an inexcusable pick back across the middle of the field. A great play by the Notre Dame defensive back to even make a break on the ball and hold on to it. But if you're at your own 28 with 33 seconds left, as I've said all the time, like, I don't really like when teams, and it happens a lot less than it used to. I don't like when teams are so cautious because possessions are so rare that, if you got 40 seconds, maybe throw it to midfield, maybe you get a PI, maybe you break something free. I mean, look at the end of the first half with Texas and Ohio State. In a way, that was kind of the game with the screen pass to Henderson. So not saying like you're expecting to score there, but I don't like being cautious. The problem is specific to that game for Aller was like, I understand what McElroy's saying. He's likely to not turn the football over, but watching him that night, I mean, he was just awful. And I mean, he hit 12 completions and there was all sorts of incompletions that just weren't even close. So it's the turnover, it's a game-winning field goal, and Notre Dame is playing for a national championship. The other thing I was thinking about, at least for the first half of the game when Penn State was up, was how was I going to talk about Notre Dame? And I've had a problem with the way I think the national media talks about Notre Dame for over a decade now. People hate on them in a way that seems entirely unfair. I mean, who gives a shit if they are or aren't in a conference? I don't quite understand that. For the most part, they actually do schedule up better than some of the other Power 4 programs ever do. So I don't think the schedule thing is as much of an issue, even if you think it was a knock against them this year. And that's fine, right? But if Notre Dame loses in a playoff, there's an extra excitement at their failure, I think. Then I can't say any other program because there's been so much excitement about the SEC having a down year. But, Notre Dame gets killed in Miami in 2013 in the national championship against Bama, right? That was before we had the 4-team college football playoff. So it was just the BCS. I remember I was there. It was ugly. All right. So they get crushed for that. They lose to Clemson in the playoff in the 2018 season, 30-3. So they get destroyed. And then 2 years later, they lose to Bama again, 31-14 in the playoff. But here they are in the national championship and technically would have been coming off of a playoff after beating the SEC champ in Georgia. Now, as I was watching the game play out, and I'm just thinking about different ways to talk about it for the podcast, which is, a big part of what I do. I've always felt like Notre Dame is unfairly criticized for their playoff failures. This year, the SEC has faced the brunt of the criticism in a down year. Everybody else is ready, sick of hearing about these guys, and now they're not even in the national championship. So I totally get it. So I don't know that Notre Dame could have matched kind of the venom that is flown around this season, which basically everybody's just taking turns doing these different things. But I always use this as an example. Like when Ohio State got smashed by Florida and LSU in back-to-back championship games, and then everybody started pointing at Ohio State, laughing at them. You're going, you're making fun of them because they're in the national championship and getting crushed. And it speaks to the recency of it, more eyeballs watching this kind of stuff. And it just never really made any sense to me. It's like everybody would trade with them, except for the teams that beat them in a national championship game. It's an awesome program. They're in the mix basically every single year. And you're going to tell them something's wrong with them? In those matchups, something was wrong for them for a night. And Notre Dame, if you go through it, I remember being in Miami for the national championship pre-4-team playoff in 2013. They got smoked, right? You go to 2018 season, they lose to Clemson in the playoff in the first round, 30-3, destroyed. 2 years later in 20, they lose to Bama, 31-14. And it's like this, never put them back in. I mean, that stuff was actually being said. I don't know if it would have happened again now because with 12 teams, you're not leaving Notre Dame out of this whole thing. But there seems to be an extra level of pleasure because, whether it's the outdated relevance, sure, they're not as relevant as the 40s. You got me. All right. They're not in a conference. Who gives a shit? Why do you care? And scheduling wise, historically, they usually always schedule pretty tough. This year was down, but whatever. I mean, they're a really good football team. And so they avoid the fourth straight postseason loss, which I would have thought, again, they got the win against Georgia. So we're just moving the goalposts if you were going to count this one because it's not 4 consecutive, but the fourth exit within 12 years. And if you're thinking of it as a BCS matchup, 2 4-team playoff matchups, and this expanded field, to have 4 playoff appearances in that short of amount of time, 90+% of the college football programs would trade places with those guys. But it's just not what we do because we just keep waiting every single week to when the team is losing. And then you're like, well, never really saw it with them, which you can certainly do. As I said, you can do with Penn State right now. This game was about toughness for Notre Dame, mental toughness where it didn't look like it was going their way. Riley Leonard being knocked out of the football game, a guy that didn't need to throw it against Georgia, but ran it in big spots. made big throws here. Again, Greathouse, the receiver, was terrific. And it's just a nasty defense. And on top of everything else, Jeremiah Love touchdown at the goal line. To do that against the personnel he was doing it against for Penn State was just absurd. I think the Carter injury didn't show itself in the first half. I think when he got landed on, it was definitely a factor there. But they found a way through the offensive line adversity, losing Leonard and the other injuries that they've had on the defensive line. This Notre Dame team is a very mentally tough football team. I also was rooting for Freeman a little bit because I didn't love the Franklin stuff leading up to it. Franklin kind of little brothered him a little, and I think that bothered Freeman. There's pieces you can read right now that'll tell you it bothered Freeman. So that part of it, and just the way Freeman carries himself, the way he just handles everything, I'm happy for him. And there's actually part of me that's kind of happy for Notre Dame to be in this game, but we also know what's going to happen if they get smashed against Ohio State. They're like, well, Georgia didn't have the quarterback. Penn State was never that good. They had boys. You just keep doing it over and over again, which I think sometimes you lose the point. Penn State, Notre Dame, certainly Notre Dame now going for the title. Both good football teams, really good football teams in a year that feels light on great teams. Fresh off a victory for Ohio State against Texas, the plucky 8-seeded Buckeyes finding a way to advance to the national championship game, 28-14. And my brother in this college football fraternity, Van Lathan, joins us. How are you, sir?
I am well, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. It was a good football game. It was good to see Ohio State tested. It felt impossible to pick against them, and yet Texas found a way to hang in. I'm sure they're going to be killing themselves for giving up the screen touchdown to end the first half. Trevian Henderson, they had the wrong defense called for that, but they still have a chance. First and goal at the 1. It goes backwards, and Ewers, who I imagine his inner dialogue when he drops back is, we'll figure it out. Gets strip sack. Sawyer, his roommate, when they were at Ohio State together, runs it back 80-plus yards to the touchdown. Ohio State will be playing Notre Dame for the national championship. So let's just talk about the game. First thing for you.
Texas played their hearts out. They were running into a team that was playing as good as I've seen a college football team play in a crucial moment, in a crucial era, in a long time. And the question in the game was going to be whether or not Texas could match up and not be overmatched, in the secondary by guys like Jeremiah Smith, not be overmatched along the offensive and defensive lines, and whether or not they would be able to deal with the sheer talent that Ohio State was putting on the field, and they did. They did. It's almost a testament to Ohio State's team that the mistakes that Texas made in the game, particularly the screen pass, like you were talking about, and some of the play calling when they got knocked down near the goal line at the end of the game, those two things ended up biting them in the ass so hard. And when you're playing a team that's playing as well as Ohio State is, any little advantage, you miss gap integrity, you call the wrong play, you make the wrong penalty, commit the wrong penalty, should I say, and you lose the game. And they had to play just that much better. It's a little bit better to take the victory home, and they weren't capable of it.
Yeah, I think every football game, and I even felt this way about the Orange Bowl, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but like in that game, it's like it feels a certain way, but that doesn't guarantee you victory. And this game, it felt like Ohio State was scarier. Maybe that's a carryover of what they had done against Tennessee, and even more impressive what they did against Oregon, where that thing was just like humiliating for an entire half. And Texas has had their issues putting teams away. I don't think you'd ever watch them and think that they're not loaded with talent. The red zone numbers offensively were always pretty alarming. They also had that weird stat where they hadn't scored a touchdown in the third quarter for 6 straight games. They made that happen, and they tied it up. But it was throws to the running back for the most part because, Golden is out for a good chunk of the middle of the game. He does come back and make a big catch a little bit later on. but it looked like he wasn't able to go, or he was telling the guys he couldn't go. And then he got back into the game. Gunnar Helm, the big tight end, who's been terrific all year long, didn't really make an impact until later in the football game.
Right.
So there's always like this settling. Like you feel like if you're even in talent, you can get to some settling part of it. But I can't understand Ewers because I know when it's right and it's working, it's like, oh, he's so composed. Nothing ever rattles this guy. And you're like, yeah, sometimes I want to see you be a little bit more rattled. He's stepping into sacks, really no pocket awareness, like to move around. Like once the pocket was going to get dented from some side of it, it was tough for him to get out of it, despite the fact that maybe the biggest play of the entire game for Texas was the 3rd and 11 where he flips it off to his side. So, I can't say that there weren't any plays where he made a play, but the overriding theme seemed to feel like if Ohio State was going to get to him, it was going to destroy most of his plan. And ultimately that ended up being the game-winning play.
Yeah. I mean, look, at the end of the game, they couldn't block him. There was penetration coming from everywhere, from the left, from the right, up the middle. There was that one play that I think you're talking about where he climbed the pocket right into the defensive tackle's nuts. Like he went right in the middle and just kind of sat there and this is over. Um, I do think that there's a talent gap. It's not a massive talent gap, but I think more than there being a talent gap player to player, there was a stark difference in how these teams were putting their shit down in games. Ohio State has looked unbeatable, and Texas has looked like thoroughly beatable against whomever they play. If you feel like you got a shot. And so for me, I really thought in this game for some reason that, especially the way the game started to look early on when Ohio State was kind of having their way with Texas in the first quarter of the game, that they would end up running away with it. And Texas found a way to hang in there and gave themselves a shot to win the football game. Look, I don't know what to make of the team down there. It's one of the oddest teams I've ever seen. They had times this year where they looked like they were the best team in college football, where they looked like they were playing the best. They had a quarterback controversy, if not a loud quarterback controversy, a quarterback controversy being whispered, to where there is a large portion of their fan base right now sitting in their homes all over Texas, all over the Southeast, that believe that if Archie Manning would have started that game tonight, that they would have won. And when I say, and every team loves the backup quarterback, but they
Yeah,
don't
not like this
love,
though.
not like this, like
Yeah.
not like this. And so to get that far and to be knocking on the door of an appearance in the college football playoff championship game and that still have so many questions about your team. Normally at this point, you've got some answers, but there's still so many questions left about particularly this Texas team to where if they'd have won this game, I wouldn't have been like super surprised, but I expected them to lose and they did.
Ohio State, from where they were just a few weeks ago against Michigan to where they're at now, and to think about their path to the national championship. Okay, I know everybody has Tennessee jokes, but I mean, I still think Tennessee's a good football team, and they
Quality team.
destroyed them. Okay,
Yeah.
destroyed them, like took their will from them before it was even halftime. To do what they did against Oregon in that first half, probably the best first half of football considering the opponent that we're going to see all season long, and then to hang in there against the Texas team when the start of it, right, you're thinking, okay, they're going to roll, but that's just not the way football works, right? There's a reason we keep watching this every weekend. I think the most important thing to remind ourselves here of like how did Ohio State get into a funk? Like, yeah, maybe Texas figured out the running game there a little bit. Clearly, Texas, their number one priority was limiting Jeremiah Smith, who had one catch for 3 yards. Yeah, and I also think like Smith is a factor on that Henderson screen because you are playing so deep, thinking like, hey, they'll probably just throw a jump ball to this guy. But the linebackers are so far back, you get that much momentum, you get the offensive lineman out there, it's a bad spot. But as I was thinking about like, how did this fall apart for Ohio State? It's actually pretty simple. They were behind the sticks so bad after that first touchdown possession. Their second possession, they were 2nd and 24 and 3rd and 26. Third possession, 2nd and 20. Fourth possession, 3rd and 18. Fifth possession, 3rd and 10 leads to 4th and 17. Touchdown, interception, then a 3 and out, no penalties. Ninth possession, 2nd and 20. So that's 5 possessions, and it's 4 straight possessions in the first half where through just the worst penalties at the worst possible time or
Sure.
pressure that Ohio State just wasn't even going to convert first downs. They can't even run their normal offense because they're so backed up behind the sticks. So I think that's the part of this that'll be lost. And like, how did they hang in there? Because look, I don't want to say if that doesn't happen, because whatever. I mean,
It's
maybe
football.
I do it sometimes, but if if that does, I mean, that's 4 straight possessions where you're like, okay, so we have no chance of converting any of these first downs. And that's the biggest reason why an offense that came out, which is funny too, because during the regular season, it looked like Ohio State was a slow starting team. They come out, they look like, here we go again. And they're just going to hit these dudes all night. Howard is absolutely torquing the football, like just rifling it in all over the place. You're like, dudes, look open. Where's the pass rush? This could get ugly. And then their penalties slow them down as much as Texas defense, which still played a really good game.
They played a really good game. They had a really good game plan. After Smith just dominated Oregon, if I would have told you last night, if I would have told you before this game that he would have the line that he would have had in this game, there's no way you'd have thought that that game would have been a game that Ohio State would have been able to win. Just you wouldn't have thought that he would have been that unproductive and they was still won the football game because he was such a big part of their offense um, in the last game. But Texas's game plan to take him away opened up other opportunities for Ohio State. Other guys were able to have big games. Other people, like even on the fourth down play, where you end up having the Will Howard scramble, he scrambles right up to this quarterback keeper all the way. You spread them out, and they have to respect what's going on out there. So you get a light box. You don't think the quarterback's going to run. He runs, stumbles down. That continues to drive there. So they were able to use the explosiveness that they have on the edges to affect and manipulate what Texas was doing on defense in other ways. And other guys back there had bigger games. Um, you know, e- I have a question for you. This was a matchup of two quote unquote offensive geniuses, Ryan Day, Steve Sarkisian. If you're taken away from this game, who's your more geniusy genius? Who was more creative? Who schemed up plays open? Who did more with what they had? Who won the battle of the minds between those guys today?
Yeah, I felt like Sark hung in there really well because
Mm,
there was nothing. Look, because Ohio State's a better football team. I mean, this is the football team we were talking about in August, right? When you're going, do you realize how loaded this team is? And the questions were about Will Howard. And I remember reading Bruce Feldman stuff. We had him on before the playoff season started. And there were other Big Ten coaches that had gone against all the different teams. They'd have all these different conference covered, right? They ran through all of it. And there were a couple opposing coaches that were just like, yeah, I'm not quite sure if Will Howard can do it. I'm not sure if he's the guy. I felt after the Oregon game, I go, I think they're going to be all right there. And I know the Michigan game was terrible, but I feel like Ohio State had more to work with. So maybe the expectation was more clearly like I just wasn't going to pick against them no matter what, even if I just,
yeah.
I have times where I want to be different and just go like, I don't want to just pick chalk all the time here. But I think Sark figuring out a way to get the running backs involved, especially when Golden was out of the game because Bond has the drop, you know, the freshman there who just Wingo is super fast and talented, but he's not a huge part of what they're doing. I think him finding ways to get matchups with the running backs and Blue having 2 touchdowns against that kind of coverage, like Sark was hanging in there knowing that he was outmanned.
Yeah, I agree.
You agree with that? All right.
I do. I do. I think most of the things that they got, it wasn't like they were dominating and winning one on ones, or, I mean, they were making plays out there. But I thought he had a really, really, really good scheme attack plan to go out there. And really, to be honest with you, what ended up happening at towards the end of the game is once the fire got lit under the defensive line ass over on Ohio State, they just started dominating. They just started winning their one on ones. Obviously, Sawyer um, uh, just busting through at the end and disrupting the entire flow of the game. I think that's the one time that I saw Quinn Ewers and I was like, "Give me something right there." Like he's in there, he's sitting in there, he's waiting for whatever to come open to come open. I'm like, there's a guy breathing down your neck. Give me something. Give me a step forward, roll out of that. Give me a sprint to the sideline. I want to see you a little bothered because you got a meathead white boy ready to kill you right now. And it doesn't look like your blood pressure is rising a little bit. Like your heart rate's not elevated at all. But I thought Sark did a great job. I wonder how Texas fans feel about this game. I, i- if you look at Texas and their program in the totality of things, you'd have to be ecstatic about where you are right now, particularly with the future with Arch Manning coming back and what they've been able to do. But I really think that there are people in Austin and Texas fans from Sea to Shining that thought this was the team. I really think there are a lot of people out there like that.
I think coming back this summer and maybe some moments, but I'm sure that Georgia game was a wake up call in Austin, and then
Yeah.
the rematch. And then the problem is that there's just a handful, like even the A&M game, they dominated that A&M game in the final score 17-7 because of the red zone issues. And, really they shut out A&M's offense. So after the Arizona State game, the fact that that got to overtime, okay, that was that probably was like the final dulling of the senses where Texas fans went in. It's not like they weren't watching these Ohio State games going like, okay, maybe we have a chance. But I doubt there was like this arrogance or this supreme confidence because they just watched this team just feel like, based on the expectations, something was a little off. Like, really good team, but just something was a little bit off. And the final score is probably the right score. And as we're talking about like who was better with the game plan, I don't know what Chip Kelly's supposed to call on 3rd and 26. I don't know what you're supposed to call on 2nd and 20, So there was just such a large chunk of this game where I'm sure the playbook was stuff pages they couldn't even look at because they were screwing themselves up so bad in those series.
Yeah. Um, Look, there's a lot going on in my college football mind right now.
All
I
right,
have to.
just open it up. Where are we? Are
Wait,
you worried? Is the SEC's eliminated? Are you going to be all right?
I'm going to be fine, but I look at
Because it didn't.
small things.
Oh, you do? Okay. Let
I
me
look
grab a
at
pen.
small things. I look at Judkins coming from Ole Miss and getting to play real big boy football now in the Big Ten. It used to be that you got a transfer from the Big Ten school, not Ohio State, which is top flight blue blood, and they would be playing big boy football at Georgia or big boy football at Bama or someplace like that. Um, I think the SEC and the coming back to earth of the conference, I think it's real. And I don't think it's a blip. I think that you'll see more competition and more fight and fire from these other conferences. The most SEC game I've watched all year took place yesterday night, and it was Penn State versus Notre Dame. That looked like SEC football to me. And I didn't watch very much SEC football in the SEC. I think there are a lot of factors to it. I'm not quite sure how rich the fan base boosters are down there to be able to compete with the NIL. I'm not so sure when you have a football tradition like exists in the SEC. I don't know how quick people really are to want to go with the times. So there are a lot of people down there in those parts that were probably a little bit more hesitant to flip fast. I mean, Saban got the fuck out, right? So I do think that all of the people that have wanted to see the SEC not be able to dump their chest and talk about we have the best conference, we have the most guys in the NFL, we have the best players in the NFL, are going to see, at least initially for the next couple of seasons, handful of seasons, um, the conference be a little bit less powerful than they've been in the past.
Yeah, maybe I'm open to it. We're going to have a national championship matchup here where it's two non-SEC schools back-to-back years, with last year being Washington and Michigan, and that hasn't happened in 20 years where you went back-to-back years for it. And I was looking up something because I was going through Notre Dame's playoff appearances, and you go back to those SEC Big Ten matchups in the playoff, and you're like, the SEC stomped those teams all the time. So it is trending in that direction. I don't know if the transfer thing, I think case by case, you can go through it. Um, Caleb Downs isn't leaving Alabama if Saban doesn't retire. Um, and clearly Ohio State, after the Michigan losses, it felt like you were reading it all summer being like, they got people involved. Like there were dudes not paying for they were stepping out on their orthodontist bills to make sure that Ohio State could get a couple extra dudes in there. So maybe it's happening, like maybe it is happening. I think the quarterback play in the conference was below the standards, but I'm surprised you think Penn State Notre Dame looked like an SEC game considering Penn State's receivers. I don't know that an SEC team would ever put out a team like that at that receiver position.
Yeah. I guess what I'm talking about more is the physicality that the game was played with. Um, the Penn State, I saw one picture of one of Penn State's receivers. Like he looked like a social worker. I saw him put him on Twitter. It's like, so not much going on. But the reason
Social workers can't ball. Is that what you're saying?
Shit, but some of these guys might be fucking social workers. The guys are fucking 29 years old playing college football now. But uh what I mean is there was look, this is gonna sound stupid, and I'm not gonna be able to articulate it perfectly. But when you watched SEC football in the past, there was a branding to it. There was a way that they played. When you saw Jamal Adams, or you saw Odell Beckham Jr., or Tyrann Mathieu, or Patrick Peterson, when you saw these guys flying around, you'd see them play teams out of conference, and these teams just could not match the intensity that caliber of athlete was bringing to the field. And if you wanted a team to be able to match that type of intensity, you had to get it in the SEC. That's just not true anymore. Like I've watched games and seen like Tennessee looks like an ordinary good college football team. Like Alabama looked like an ordinary good college football team. Ole Miss looked like an ordinary good college football team. Texas, as well as they play today, looks like a team that's not a dominating team. That's the best team. That's the final team that's left out of the SEC. And so depth um, issues of dominance along the lines, the NIL changing things and taking kids away from players. I can't remember the last time LSU didn't have a bunch of animal dog demons along the defensive line. It's just different now. And so I think it's different. And I'm not sure, it's not just the transfer portal, it's NIL. It's not being able to put on one defense and be like, oh my God, this defense has 7 first and second rounders on it. And we're everywhere. We got guys on the back end. We got guys in the trenches. We got guys at linebacker. And then we have safeties back there that are playing. I think it's different now. And I think it'll be that way for a little while. I do think that they will adapt to how things are. I do think that things will change. But I'll be honest with you, like being an LSU fan, it is a concern about how well resourced we are, right? Like the reason to go and play for LSU was because of that. It was literally because of the soil. It was literally because if you're from the 337 or the 318 or the 225 or the 504, it meant something to play for them. Now, these kids that are coming in there, they're from a specific socioeconomic background, a lot of them. And you can't fucking tell them to turn down $4 or $5 million. You can't tell them to turn down $500,000. That's a life-changing money in Louisiana. And that'll make you go somewhere else. And if we don't have the boosters that can play in those types of deep waters, we're doing better in NIL now. And if we don't have, coming from a state that's not a really rich state, if we don't have the people that'll put that money up, I mean, we're going to be at a perpetual disadvantage.
I want to close on like the last part of this, though, just kind of talking about the Ohio State run here. And, there have been different times, and it usually has more to do with the days where I was doing it every day. And you would go through stretches where you'd be like, I can't stand this fan base the most, and then sometimes it would get cycled out and be like, you know what fan base is the most annoying this year? It's this school. It's this program. Ohio State has been ranked number 1 for me for a bunch of seasons
Oh,
in
wow.
all the years that I've been doing this. But once Day lost to Michigan again, I would say last year. This year it was impossible to defend the outcome of that game and the way that game was played. Like I didn't start the next day going like, hey, um, but I looked at Day, and the whole point that I made a year ago was that it was funny because I was hearing the same stuff about Harbaugh. And because Harbaugh brought all this attention to himself, like it's just extra with Harbaugh, right? And it wasn't really to the standard. They weren't beating Ohio State. And people were like, and people really, with those two fan bases, lose their minds about that rivalry. Like I think there's way more Ohio State fans if you just polled it, like good polling too, not the Iowa poll. If it were a poll where you said, let's
A little victory lap for you there, huh?
Yeah, my God, my people, we did
Yeah, you like that.
If you polled Ohio State fans and said, would you rather beat Michigan or win a national championship? The people would say we'd rather just beat Michigan. It's way higher than you think it is, which is an insane answer, but I think it's accurate. I think I'm being accurate about this. So look, I'm telling you my own history about the whole thing. And I just felt like, look, Day wins enough games. Like you guys are out of your mind, and be careful who you think you're going to be getting, because so many of the programs are like, all right, let's get rid of this guy. And like, is Saban available? Right. There's a big part of me that thinks about Jack Sawyer, right? Linebacker for Ohio State, where he has an incredible game against Michigan and they screw it up. They lose the one time, like the other years, you can kind of understand it. I think 2 years ago, that game's still strange to me. Last year, not surprising. Michigan wins the national championship. This year was impossible. This year, it couldn't happen. Right. And it happens. And then it leads to like a lot of stuff that I don't agree with, where Michigan's planting the flag, which fine, go ahead and do it. But it's not Jack Sawyer's fault for deciding like this shit's over. Okay. I'm not doing this. And then people would say, well, when you lose, there's nothing you can do. It's like, all right, hey, I'm from Michigan. We beat you guys. I'm going to send suggestive DMs to your sister now. Well, nothing I can do. Yeah, nothing I can do. We lost.
If we have a fight, if I get in a fight playing basketball and I lose the fight, doesn't mean you can fuck my girl. Like, you know what I'm saying? There's a limit.
Right. So, like, the fact that Jack Sawyer and other guys in Ohio State were like, I know, like, what are we supposed to let you do? Just piss everywhere?
Yeah.
Like, we're not having it. And that was not a popular opinion. And I think about him making that play and now being in the national championship and how this is it feels like more than full circle. It's like full circle and another lap for this team to be in the national championship, clearly favored. I'll get you a line here in a second. Is there any part of you that, even with some of my history with Ohio State, who I haven't always loved it, I can tell you today, I feel good about this redemptive arc from where they were at in that Michigan game.
So they lost the game, and I want you guys, don't take this from me. Ask this guy, my friend in Mecca Don. He's a rapper, okay? He played for Ohio State. He's the biggest fucking Ohio State fan ever. All right, he goes out there. Mecca Don, at Mecca Don, Mekkadon. He's the biggest fucking Ohio State fan ever. Him and his brother. His brother's some kind of weird robot man. When I tell you, his brother, okay,
interesting crew.
His brother, okay, is like the most impressive person I've ever known. He has a JD from Stanford and an MD from Harvard. Like, it's weird. Like, these guys are like crazy accomplished guys. And Jim went to Penn the whole nine. He played at Ohio State, then he went to Penn for law school. After they lost the game, if you guys don't believe me, I called in Mecca. I said, the funniest thing is going to happen to you guys. And he was like, what? I said, you guys are going to win a national championship. I was like, the fight at the end of the game was a good thing. You guys are going to win a national championship. You guys are going to get in the playoffs, win a national championship, and then it's going to be what I call the Southern Grambling debacle, because there is another college football game that means more than the season. There's only one I can think of. It's the Bayou Classic. If you guys ever been like watching TV on a Saturday after Thanksgiving, and you're like, well, what is this black college football game on NBC? That's the Bayou Classic. And let me tell you something about the Bayou Classic. Being a Southern guy, rest in peace, Dad. Most of the fans watching that game would rather win the Bayou Classic, Southern versus Grambling, than win the SWAC or go have your team play in the Celebration Bowl or play for a black college national championship. That game is a one-game Super Bowl that the entire season revolves around. Okay. And so for the Ohio State fans now that lost to Michigan, I think that was key to those players deciding, being embarrassed like that, and that staff being embarrassed like that, and deciding we have to put it all together because this is the lowest moment that the program has experienced in a very long time. That loss was the lowest moment that the program has experienced for a very long time. It's one thing to lose to Michigan. It's another thing to lose to Michigan when you are more competent than Michigan in every conceivable way. And it looks like Michigan just punked you and took your hearts out of your chest. Now we'll see. We'll see how much they because I think things have changed now. I think they've seen the team play so well that while they're still frustrated about the Michigan game, I think when it's all said and done, having another national championship is they're going to be cool with it. They're going to be okay with it. They're going to be fine with the way the season played out. But they were I was talking friends off the ledge. They were done with Day. They were done with the whole fucking thing. They were done with everything. But I knew that would light a fire under the team and we would see them play their best football.
Well, you were right, because again, the path there and to do this as impressively as they did in the first two rounds, and clearly, look, they were the better football team for 3+ hours tonight. You don't watch that game, have them win 28-14 and go, well, that was weird. How did that happen? Like, to me, Arizona State, Texas was weird. Like, it was kind of a
That was my
common
man.
theme with Texas. Right.
That was my man, Scattergories, though. Shout out to Scattergories, bro. Boy, I tell you straight up, I have not been that impressed. I haven't been that impressed with a white boy I didn't know since I first heard Eminem. When I first heard Eminem, I was like, God damn, it's like that? What Dre find this motherfucker at? Like, he was really rapping. And Scatterboo came into that bitch saying I'm the best player, and then he went ham like college football 25. I loved that game. I was watching from a mineral pool in Desert Hot Springs down there in Palm Springs. We was over there for the thing. I was all floating in the hot springs, watching Scatterboo just go nuts. And when you have Ryan, you had to have loved that, right? That's Scatterboo is so Russillo coded, is he not?
Yeah, there's a thread I'm working on for my people because it's been a good run with Jokic, and I just need to piece it all together. I may get
Okay.
your approval. I'll have it in drafts and I'll send it to you to see what you think.
But here's the thing, Jokic don't count. It's not one of yours.
Really?
Bruh, first of all, decide who you are. Because Jokic, you can't have Jokic. You
All
can't
right, you
have him.
claiming Freeman?
No, hold on. Here's the deal about Freeman, though. Freeman said he don't want to be claimed. That's a free agent. Y'all can have him. Freeman said he don't want to be claimed. You can't have Jokic. That's an H-1B visa. Y'all hate those. So what I'm saying is,
I don't even know what that is.
like you can't have Jokic.
All right.
These are your people. These are your hopes. Chet when he comes back.
Yeah. Doug McDermott's ours.
Doug McDermott, Cooper Flagg, Tyler Hero. Okay. He's
Duncan
not very
Robinson.
good at jiu-jitsu, but he could play. There's so many different guys in there, but you can't have Jokic, you can't have Lucas. Those are HB1 visas. Those are like guys over there. You can't have them. Scatterboo is a guy like that. That's America, bro. Come on, America first.
Yeah, no, Scatterboo's always fascinated me too, because like when it started getting, I mean, the numbers are just absurd, right? And he started talking about him a little bit more, the Iowa State Big 12 championship game, and the broadcast is like, they had to pull Scatterboo aside this offseason and be like, you need to be a leader, and you need to work on conditioning and just how you interact. And it was like, man, this guy was just a fat dick to everybody. Because that's basically what they were saying was the vibe around him. And it's like, you know what? That guy has to kind of be a dick. He has to have been a dick to be this good and then be like, you guys still don't believe in me the entire time. I want to back up to something else you said, though.
Sure.
Give me your thoughts on an early 20s Russillo when he first heard Eminem.
Oh, man. Because, see, this is the thing. You got to be able to see yourself in it. Because I didn't believe it. And My Name Is comes out, and I'm like, what the type is this shit? And then all of a sudden, I'm listening to other shit, and this motherfucker's like, a serial killer had murder material in the cereal box on top of your cereal. Here we go again with Ira medicine out of my mind. And then There's 7 different levels of devil worship, horses head, human sacrifice, cannibalism, cannibals and exorcisms, animals having sex with them, camels, mammals, and rabbits. I'm like, yo, this guy's fucking rapping. You probably thought when you listened to it, you probably had a moment of like, I'm a part of it. I'm not just
He's talking
watching
to
the hip
me.
hop. He's
Yeah, he's
talking to
talking to me
you.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that's Ryen Russillo rap. He's rapping for you. And so I probably think that you felt seen, you know what I mean? Much like the way I felt when Barack Obama was elected to the presidency.
I thought you knew me, Van. I thought you knew me.
You don't like him.
I resisted it hard. I went out of my way to resist it. I was like, what is
Oh,
this
see,
whack
you with the
shit?
see.
Yeah. Oh,
I don't
yeah.
like that. Why
Oh, all
would
right.
you so why would you resist Eminem? See, I loved him. Loved him.
How did that work for you? Like, how many of your guys resisted it?
Oh my God, bro. It was them college years was so hard. It was like, I remember one time me and my man Sean got into an argument.
Could you throw it on in the car? Were there certain cars you were like, no?
Bruh, there was this whole thing, like freshman or sophomore year at Tech where I just leaned into being the counterculture guy in the crew. I was making them watch Seinfeld. I was like, bruh, it's funny. And they're like, Van, what's wrong with you? You have an identity. I'm like, bruh, I'm not having, it's fine. It's no black people. It's funny. It's a funny show. And when we first started listening to Eminem, it was Renegade. I remember there was a message board. I was on the message board. The message board was talking about how bad M did Jay on Renegade. And I was like, bro, y'all gotta hear the song. I'm telling you, Jay is Jay. He is a god. Has a much better rap career and catalog than Eminem. But on that song, M fucked over Hove. He did. And on that one song, he fucked over Hove. Hove is way more versatile, a better rapper than M, a better artist than M. But in that song, he fucked over him, and that converted all my boys. Because if black people, we're nothing if we're not fair. We're fair people.
I was unfair. I was being unfair. I was like, turn that shit off. I don't want to hear this. Because I did not want to be the guy in my pickup truck with the windows down, just cranking My Name Is.
But see, that's just because of optics. You wanted to be Tribe Called Quest Russillo.
You know, it was probably Jizza, Liquid Swords. I could just never stop listening to that, even years later.
And that's great rap, right? But but you felt like you weren't free to listen to Eminem. But now,
I know I didn't want to. Well, I appreciate him now. I respect it, much like I respect even Penn State's season.
Oh, wow!
Yeah, there you go. Hey, not bad.
There you go. See, to me, I needed Penn State to win the national championship badly. I needed them to do it.
Why?
Because everybody else, this has been one of the hardest college football seasons for me ever. I'll be honest with you.
I was terrible this year. Yeah, the only thing I had was my early Oregon pick, which then made me handcuffed to them when they played Ohio State. So that actually ended up screwing me over, even though it looked good for months. But go ahead.
So even though I picked Ohio State and I told Mecca that Ohio State would win, I've had a long-standing rivalry with the Ohio State football fans. Even me and the Mecca have argued on this podcast before, going way, way back to after the time LSU stumped a mud hole in their ass in a national championship game. All right. So I've had a long-standing rivalry with them. Then you have the obvious narrative of Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame, Brian Kelly, LSU rivalry that's popped up out of nowhere and isn't going anywhere. So I didn't want them to win. And then Rachel Lindsay, who is my co-host on Higher Learning, is a Texas alum. Now, I ask her right now who the offensive coordinator for Texas. She probably couldn't tell you. However, she loves Texas. She's a quote unquote huge Texas fan who can't name one person on the D line, but like a huge Texas fan. So if Texas won, I was gonna have to deal with that. The only team that I could root for without having to get shit from a fan base was Penn State. And I know what it's like to root for James Franklin now, and I'll never do it again.
My name is James Franklin. You want to take a guess at the line for Ohio State Notre Dame as we finish this? I don't mean to put you on the spot, so you can pass.
3.
Whoa. No, my friend. Ohio State minus 9.5.
Oh my God. I, what do you think about that?
It was definitely going to be a touchdown. Or, I mean, we'll see where we're at tomorrow, but I'm not surprised. It's over a touchdown. But I put you on the spot there. Yeah.
No, it's fine. I think Notre Dame plays it closer than that. I really do.
Well, sounds like somebody likes those 9.5.
I do like that. I think Notre Dame plays a little closer than that. I think that's a little bit of, yeah, I think they're doing something that one of my good friends, Josh Pate, has done, which has underestimated Notre Dame the entire year. I think you motherfuckers are going to locker room Notre Dame right into a national championship if you're not careful. I think it's going to be a closer game than that. Could be wrong.
Well, the respect angle is there because Vegas does not respect them. Where can we check out all your stuff? Promo time.
Higher Learning. Ringerverse. Whenever I'm with my friend Russillo here, check us out, Riggs and Murtaugh. And also, I want to say one thing before I get out of here. The Brian Kelly, Marcus Freeman thing is bullshit. Okay? I'm sick of it already. I'm sick of the bullshit. Okay? Let us deal with, this is the new rule. Nobody else can talk about Brian Kelly. Let us deal with Brian Kelly. You guys worry about your own coaches. All right? Marcus Freeman, fucking great looking. He's doing this whole thing. You don't want to be black. It's cool. Like it.
Easy. That's not what he said. I don't want to be associated with that.
I'm joking. It was a fine answer to someone who is put in a weird position to be asked about their race all the time. It's fine. I'm joking. A lot of respect for him. He's done a great job at Notre Dame. But I am so annoyed right now at even the LSU fans who are incessantly having an argument that I believe to be apples and oranges. Let Notre Dame and the rest of them play football. You got some Baton Rouge boys there, Ryan Clark's kid, Jaden Osbury. Let them play football. Good luck to them. But other than that, man, check me out. Still loving the game. We'll see what the SEC does next year.
You're the best, man. Enjoy your Friday night. A late taping here for the Russillo podcast. So we really appreciate you disrupting what is on deck. Imagine some EDM, some Alley, some place that Entourage had in episode 4, season 3. Oh, he has a controller up. So some Madden. Are you doing some recruiting?
Oh no, it's college football.
Yeah.
I've had to rebuild LSU secondary. That's what I'm doing. Stay safe, Los Angeles. I love everybody out there, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to know you're safe and you're part of the county.